Revolutionary Roads, a podcast of the North Carolina History Project here at the John Locke Foundation. My name is Donald Bryson, CEO of the John Locke Foundation. I'm happy to continue down this podcast as we talk about the story of North Carolina in the American Revolution. And if you've listened to the first 7 episodes, please like, subscribe, share with your friends, and spread the word of the rich history that is in the Tar Heel State as it relates to the American Revolution. There's a lot to cover. And today, I think we're going to wrap up the military section of that story, but we still have 2 episodes to go after this. When we left you in our last episode, episode 7, we talked about the Battle of Kings Mountain. And if you'll remember in that conversation, the Battle of Kings Mountain was preparatory for the British to invade North Carolina from South Carolina. I think that's a fear of North Carolinians now, of South Carolina invading North Carolina. All jokes aside, the British had essentially stalled out at this point in the war, actually a year or so before in the war, in New York. George Washington was back and forth with the British outside of New York, but it was essentially a siege for a long period of time. And so they being the British, re-upped for another attempt at a invasion of the southern colonies. They retook Savannah, Georgia in 1778. And then in May of 1780, Charleston, South Carolina fell, which was very significant, largest city, most significant economic city in the South. And thereby, the British very quickly took over South Carolina. So that was in May of 1780. In August of 1780 was the Battle of Camden, South Carolina, where General Horatio Gates, the leader of the Continental Army in the South, who had been a hero, or celebrated as a hero, at least from the Battle of Saratoga in New York, was down commanding the Southern Army, and he was defeated very soundly at Camden by General Cornwallis. I would call this probably the high watermark of the British invasion of the South. This is when the British are really getting ready to invade. They send Major Patrick Ferguson into the backcountry and in the mountains of North Carolina to recruit loyalists to sort of serve as that left flank of the northern invasion of North Carolina by the British, and to get ready for that. Those loyalists are trapped and defeated at Kings Mountain, which is about 7 miles south of the town of Kings Mountain, North Carolina, or the present town of Kings Mountain, North Carolina, on the North Carolina-South Carolina line. And that really hampers the abilities of the Cornwallis invasion force out of South Carolina. But due to the major Patriot defeat at the Battle of Camden, this paves the way for a new face to arrive on the scene, a Rhode Islander born into a Quaker family named Nathanael Greene. And that's where I'll take it to our guest today. It's Thomas Sobol. He's a Supervisory Park Ranger at the Guilford Courthouse National Military Battlefield in Greensboro, North Carolina. And if you've not gone, you should. We'll talk a little bit more about the park later. I hope you can give us some details about it. But we've painted the stage. I think in December of 1780, Nathanael Greene comes south. He's been serving with Washington regularly and faithfully throughout the war.
Correct.
Who is this guy?
Yes, Nathanael Greene, the fighting Quaker, as you mentioned, is from Rhode Island. He rises through the ranks. He enlists as a private in the Rhode Island militia and quickly is told, you need to be a much higher rank than a private. He goes from private to major general in the Continental Army within a matter of months.
To be clear, not typical.
Not typical, no. Nathanael Greene, as you said, follows George Washington through the war. Nathanael Greene is a battlefield commander in early stages around the campaign when the British take New York and the Continental Armies retreat through New Jersey. Nathanael Greene, later on in the war, has a command that he says nobody ever gets famous for serving as quartermaster general.
Right.
He's right in that he has that very difficult task of keeping the army supplied. Mm-hmm. He takes that position at a particularly difficult moment in the Revolutionary War during the winter encampment of Valley Forge.
And let's talk about why, if you don't mind, just for
Sure.
a second. That job's hard anyway for an army with, in a regular nation, right, today.
Yes.
But he was a quartermaster for an army that was fighting for a Congress that itself had no money.
Right, correct.
So he's scrounging for every bit of supplies.
Yes. My first position with the National Park Service was actually at Morristown National Historical Park,
Okay.
a later winter encampment. He's still Quartermaster General, and you read accounts of the scarcity of food. The Continental Army is, in effect, one of the largest cities in the infant nation.
Huh. A moving city.
A moving city, yes. That's why when they build a log hut city at Valley Forge, later at Morristown, a couple of years later, that becomes the new 5th biggest town in the country. And to feed that many men, you have to bring food from very far. So particularly just the most boring accounts are fascinating for historians. Imagining so many head of cattle being marched all the way from Connecticut to New Jersey in what's the coldest winter on record.
Right.
And by the time the cattle arrive, they're lean, and it's hardly worth butchering them.
Oh,
So these are the difficulties that you're facing as a commissary general, a quartermaster general.
that's rough. So why Nathanael Greene? Why is he picked to replace Horatio Gates?
General Washington always said that if he were to fall, he would have wanted Nathanael Greene to take over from him. So, in effect, whatever is the most difficult job, the most important job at the moment, that becomes Nathanael Greene's next job.
He's the fixer.
He's the fixer, yes. So he arrives in December 1780 in North Carolina. And when he arrives in Charlotte, he starts to suspect that, and this is a direct quote from the Greene papers, that the virtue of the people is not equal to the sacrifices necessary to be made. So he's starting to see some depressed spirits even after the resounding victory at Kings Mountain. He's seeing war weariness. We're getting into the 6th year of this 8-year Revolutionary War for our independence, and he sees that folks' spirits are understandably depressed.
Right. And we don't talk about the length of that war very much, but I've tried to press it as we've gone through these episodes. I think when you go up to a typical American and you say war, their mind goes to the Civil War or World War II. Both were 4 years in length.
Totally.
But we're getting into year 6.
Exactly.
And this has been going on for a while. We were, believe it or not, a much more prosperous nation by the 1860s and certainly the 1940s than we were in the 1770s. So yeah, I can imagine these people were a little over it one way or the other.
Yes, certainly. And though the war hadn't been fought in the South, with the exception of, the Southern Expedition, their defeat at Fort Moultrie, and the Loyalists' defeat at Morris Creek, the southern states are sending their men to fight in the Northern Army. So North Carolinians, Virginians, South Carolinians are fighting in those big battles around Philadelphia in 1777. So the South is still a part of the war effort. It truly is a continental army. They're
providing some supplies. They're providing men.
Yeah.
Mothers have buried sons.
Yes.
Right. So Nathanael Greene, the fixer, as I'm now going to call him, arrives on the scene in 1780. One, where is the Continental Army physically when he arrives? And two, what does he do next?
Nathanael Greene takes command of the surviving Continentals who had either not been present at the battlefield at Camden or survived that defeat. And he's really taking over a very veteran regiment from Maryland, the 1st Maryland, and then he's having to liaise with all the Southern militia leaders. That's why his skills as a politician and a diplomat are incredibly important. To have effective command at any point in the Revolutionary War, you need to not only work well with the Continental Congress, but you also need to work well with the state governors who are responsible for helping raise the regiments to fight in the professional army. You have to work well with the Southern politicians who oversee the militia commanders. When he tells a militia commander to do something, he doesn't have that authority. He just hopes they listen to him.
Right.
Thomas Sumter answers to the governor of South Carolina. He doesn't answer to Nathanael Greene.
Right.
And Thomas Sumter treats that relationship very seriously. So he is one that doesn't collaborate as effectively with the Continental Army as folks like Francis Marion and Andrew Pickens, who do so willingly and far more often than Thomas Sumter.
That's really interesting. So I'm assuming that means that they were in South Carolina when Greene arrives. Is that right?
Border area, like more North Carolina, actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
But they're militia troops from both states, I'm
Yes.
sure.
No, very, very true. Yes. A lot of South Carolinians are having to spend time in North Carolina, Virginia because of the British occupation of the interior of South Carolina.
And there's another Patriot commander. We can call him a general. I don't know that we necessarily call him a regular, from Virginia, not named George Washington. We've not talked about very much, but he's important to this battle of Cowpens that we're going to talk. I'm assuming we're going to talk about here in a minute.
Yeah.
Named Daniel Morgan, famed for his use of riflemen.
Yes.
Tell us about Daniel Morgan a little bit and walk us through his significance to get us to Guilford Courthouse.
Daniel Morgan is a longtime veteran of conflicts in colonial America. As a young man, he fought in the French and Indian War.
Yeah.
He bears the scars of a British officer's whip on his back, so he has a long-standing hatred of the British even before there's a war for independence. He served as a teamster during the French and Indian War. In some of the first campaigns of the Revolution, he has a leading role. He is one of the principal commanders in the invasion of Canada.
Yeah.
We hoped that there would be a 14th state early on in the war. We were feeling quite ambitious. That didn't work out. No, he's a prisoner of war. He's there in the wintry attack around Christmas, New Year's of Quebec City, along with Benedict Arnold, someone who was incredibly competent and brave for the American cause until he wasn't.
Right. Too smart for his own good.
Yeah. And Daniel Morgan, he's now sent to have command in the Southern Theater, and because he has sort of a background of familiarity with folks on the frontier and appreciates the skills and competence of the militia, but also appreciates that they're not professionally outfitted.
Right.
Even if they're brave enough to, stand up to a bayonet attack, they almost never have their own bayonets.
Right.
Some of them, as riflemen, can't mount bayonets, aren't going to be competent in that sort of fighting.
Right.
So when the army is split and Cornwallis splits his army to pursue the two wings of the American army, he sends Lieutenant Colonel Bannister Tarleton to attack Dan Morgan, and they meet in the upstate. The Battle of Cowpens is so named because that was a cow pasture.
Right.
Actually, there was a series of few rising hills.
It's a very pragmatic name for the place.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. And
It's called Cowpens because there were pens of cows.
yeah. And Daniel Morgan decides to leverage the numbers of militia within the army by using them in two advanced lines of skirmishers. So he basically says, stand your ground on this ridge, fire a couple of volleys, cause casualties, retreat in good order. Second line of militia, please do the same. At the far end of the battlefield, the Continentals will be there to eliminate the remaining British. And the battlefield proceeds fairly closely to that hope. The militia do their job. There's a bit of confusion towards the end of the battle where some of the Maryland Continentals mistakenly hear an order to retreat. So they do turn around and march away from the British, further sucking in the British.
Right.
The British are basically being led to believe that they're winning the whole time because they don't interpret the militia withdrawal as strategic. They interpret it as, retreat.
Right.
So they lose some of their discipline. They're not keeping their lines. They're getting spread out. And when the Americans do counterattack, they're very vulnerable to it.
Yeah.
So when the officers of the Marylanders get their men under control and tell them to turn about and deliver a volley, they do so right in the face of the British regulars. And it's devastating for the British. And then you have American cavalry on the scene as well, and it's the only successful double envelopment in the Revolutionary War. So the British army is entirely surrounded at Cowpens.
Double envelopment is where, just
Yeah.
for the listeners, it's where they go around both flanks.
Both flanks, correct.
And I think when we think about the Revolution, and honestly the Civil War as well, or we call it the Second Civil War, this is the first, we think of two lines of guys with muskets, or at least muzzle-loading rifles, one way or the other, getting in front of each other and just blazing away each other for a while. And that happens from time to time. But what Daniel Morgan did here significantly, and we'll learn more about at Guilford Courthouse as well, is think about a layer cake, right? He creates layers to his defense because he knows these are just folks from around home. They're not used to standing up to regular soldiers. And look, some of these are, dragoons and guards battalions. Like, these are really serious British soldiers. Like, some of them are actually very elite units.
Yes, some of them are.
And so Morgan knew that they weren't going to stand up, and so he put them in layers. I know you're going to fade away. That's fine. If you can shoot once, that's great. And then just fade back. Shoot once and then fade back. And so he makes it more difficult over time as the British progress into the battle, which is the point you're making, right?
Exactly. Yes. The British suffer hundreds of men captured as prisoners of war, and they take some casualties, not nearly to the extent of the casualties they suffer, killed, wounded at Guilford Courthouse, which we'll talk about later.
Right.
But Cornwallis loses about 900 men from his army, and Tarleton leaves the field really just with his legion of loyalist cavalrymen.
So Cornwallis has invaded South Carolina, took Charleston very handily, 5,000.
Yes, biggest defeat of the Revolution for the Americans.
Are taken prisoner.
Yes.
And then there's the Battle of Camden, where Gates is handily defeated. And then that's why I called Camden the high watermark of the campaign for the British, because the Kings Mountain thing foils their attempt to get a bunch of loyalist volunteers. And then they get kind of punched in the face a little bit at Cowpens.
Very much so, yes.
And this is right on the North Carolina-South Carolina border, and they're still prepping to invade North Carolina, right?
Yes. So Cornwallis's hope after Cowpens is to catch the American army and free all those hundreds of British prisoners of war. So over the next 6 weeks, we have what historians today call the Race to the Dan, meaning the American army is fleeing across the interior of North Carolina, trying to get across the Dan River to send all those British prisoners of war to prisoner of war camps that have been established and functioning in the Shenandoah Valley. All of those folks captured at Saratoga or up in the Shenandoah Valley.
So the Cowpens is on January 17th. So for the next 6 weeks, the next month and a half.
Yes.
Right. There's this race to the Dan.
Yes, it's...
and can you describe where the Dan River is for people who don't know?
Southern border of Virginia.
Right.
Yes.
So they're coming across North Carolina.
Yes.
Almost to Virginia, essentially.
Bannister Tarleton, the British commander at Cowpens, in his memoirs written after the Revolution, states that the Race to the Dan is one of the best fighting withdrawals he's ever heard of, and he gives the Americans high praise for their competence in executing it. And it involves a very keen knowledge of the geography of the South. That's one of the first things Nathanael Greene does when he takes command in December 1780. He wants a cartographer.
Yeah.
He wants all these rivers mapped. He wants to know where the fords are located, where he can cross his men on foot. He wants to gather as many boats as possible to help. He wants all of the boats on the far side of the river. When the British get to these rivers, he wants the American army to have already crossed. So you do see skirmishes during the Race to the Dan, and it's when, fortunately, the Americans have all crossed to the far side of the river, on the northern side of the river, and they will contest the early British stages of fording the river, and the British will take some casualties at those river crossings.
Yeah. And so they make it across, they being the
Americans, make it across
the Dan.
all of those North Carolina rivers, and then finally the Dan River.
Yeah.
And then when the moment's right, Nathanael Greene recrosses the Dan River, marches his army in the vicinity of Guilford Courthouse, the county seat of Guilford County, which has only been around since 1771,
Right.
a result of the Regulators' Rebellion,
Right.
an effort to create more local governance, more
Right.
representation for the state legislature.
Yeah. So listeners have heard me say this, but this is a fun time in North Carolina history because you find all the names that are named for things today.
Yes.
And so you're talking about Guilford Courthouse in Guilford County, but Guilford Courthouse is no longer named Guilford Courthouse. It is now named Greensboro.
Correct. Yes.
I can't imagine where that name comes from, right?
Exactly.
Nathanael Greene,
Yeah,
but there's Greenville, there's Greensboro, there's Greenville, Georgia, there's Greenville, South Carolina, there's Greenville, Tennessee. There are counties all over the nation named Greene, most of them after Nathanael Greene.
Yes.
And so now we have Greene has in March of 1781, and just to signpost for everybody, you've heard of the Battle and Siege of Yorktown, where Cornwallis inevitably surrenders. We win the Revolution. Spoiler alert.
Yes.
But the Battle of Yorktown happens in October 1781.
Correct.
So we're getting in in the short rows of the war.
Yeah.
So Greene recrosses the Dan and comes back into Guilford County to modern day Greensboro.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to us about the land and how he used the land in preparation for this battle, because Cornwallis is hunting him this whole time.
Yes. So in the race to the Dan, Greene passes through Guilford Courthouse and notices that there are some advantageous ridge lines there, terrain that sticks in his mind. And in March 1781, both armies are actually seeking to meet each other and deliver a death blow. The British want to knock out the Americans to speed up their chase of Greene's army. They've had to burn a lot of their excess baggage. They're very lean, very hungry. They're campaigning in winter right now. It's possible because the winter isn't severe in the south, so it's 24/7 campaigning.
Yeah, unless it's mud, but yeah.
Yeah, but they need to feed the army, and living off the land during winter is very difficult for both armies. So Greene takes advantage of that terrain and adopts that same defense in depth that Daniel Morgan uses. Morgan and Greene correspond together in a series of letters about the victory at Cowpens. Morgan shares the lessons learned, and Greene decides to take that same tactic.
There's really good leadership lessons in that.
Yes, definitely.
The willing to share information, the willing to take information.
Yes.
I wish a lot more politicians and leaders would take that today, but I'll leave that alone. But there's some good leadership lessons there. Go on.
Sure. And Greene also has the benefit of his army doubling in size and just like the week before. So he also has the men and the confidence to take the fight to the British. There are a lot of new levies of Virginia Continentals coming to the army, a whole new regiment of Maryland Continentals coming to the army.
Was that the second Maryland?
The second Maryland,
right.
Yeah. Some militia are bleeding off of the army. Some militia are arriving. There had been some conflict between the militia and the Continental Army.
Sure.
But now that the fight is coming, everyone's got a unified mission, a sense of purpose. Early morning hours of March 15th, 1781, Light Horse Harry Lee's Legion is sent to scout down New Garden Road, present-day area of Guilford College, a Quaker school established in the 1800s. You had a Quaker settlement in the 1700s called New Garden. The local name of the road. It was also during the time period called the Great Salisbury Road. It was the highway of the 18th century. Right? North Carolina, part of the wagon road.
But
certainly.
As you said, now people can go to Greensboro and drive down New Garden Road. That's
New Garden Road is still paved, still very close to its trace in the 1700s.
Right.
Yes. So there they fight a skirmish with the advance parties of the British Army led by Tarleton. So there's already been a little fight even before the 2.5-hour Battle of Guilford Courthouse.
So is that Lee's cavalry that skirmishes with Tarleton's cavalry?
Yes.
So Lee is interesting in a lot of different ways, but just to bring a lot of different history together, Light Horse Harry Lee is the father of Robert E. Lee.
Famously the father of Robert E. Lee.
Right,
yes.
who becomes a very famous Confederate general in the Civil War.
Yeah. Henry Lee, or Light Horse Harry Lee, famously delivers the principal eulogy at Washington's funeral. He also serves as governor of Virginia after the Revolutionary War. Yep. Has a lot of business efforts that fail. He actually spends some time in a debtor's prison, is almost exiled, self-exiles to the Caribbean, and then tries to return to the United States when his health is failing, trying to get back home to Virginia. But he actually makes it as far as the Widow Greene's plantation on a seacoast island of Georgia, Cumberland Island. Nathanael Greene had already passed away, but Katie Greene welcomes Light Horse Harry Lee, and that's where Lee unfortunately passes away.
I see. So Bannister and Tarleton skirmish.
Tarleton and Lee skirmish.
Sorry.
Yes. Yeah.
Tarleton and Lee skirmish. This is the opening of the battle. Walk us through the battle.
Sure. You had also asked for me to describe the terrain, and that really influences the course of the battle. The three lines are at very different kind of, they see very different terrain around them, and the battlefield is very large.
It is.
The battlefield is 1,000 acres. Today, the National Military Park manages just over 250 acres of the original size of this large battle.
Even if you drive through it, as I was going through it,
it's It's a couple mile loop road that we
Yeah,
have.
you notice like having to carry a musket and go through this while I'm being shot at one way or the other seems like a lot of work.
Yes, yeah. So the battlefield consisted of open fields separated by a lot of thick forests and some undulating ridges. The battle opens on the Hoskins farmstead, a 150-acre farm. That's the furthest western piece of the battlefield.
Okay.
And you have North Carolina militia along the first line of the defense. They're briefed by Nathanael Greene before the battle opens to just fire a couple volleys and then retreat in good order. And given that that's the first line of the American defense, Greene is very cognizant that he doesn't want his flanks turned. So the North Carolina militia are buttressed on the northern flank by some elite Continentals from Delaware, Kirkwood's Delawares. He fights in like almost every battle in the Revolution.
Okay.
He fights in like 30-some battles over the course of his life. He's one of the most famous soldiers from the Revolutionary War, really.
Wow.
He is an officer.
30 is a lot of battles.
Yeah. And you also have William Washington's Dragoons, distant cousin of George Washington, one of the heroes of Cowpens in that victory. He's on the northern flank. And then on the southern flank, you have Lee's Legion, a mix of cavalry and infantry. And you also have William Campbell in charge of a lot of riflemen, some of his Virginians, and a lot of North Carolina riflemen.
Okay.
And William Campbell is one of those heroes of the Battle of Kings Mountain, one of those men who would be a lot more famous, but he actually passes away in 1781 during the Yorktown campaign.
Interesting.
Just of disease.
Yeah.
A tragic loss.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's a siege. That takes a lot of people in sieges in those days. It's more the disease than the bullets because you're just sitting there and stagnant.
So that's the first line, and then about 400 yards east of that, you have the Virginia militia on a fairly prominent ridge north and south of New Garden Road.
Okay.
And then way further to the east, you have the actual town of Guilford Courthouse, and you have cleared fields in front of it, and you had the Continentals from Maryland closest to the road, and then Virginians further north along that ridge line. And there's a road leading from the town in the northern direction, Reedy Fork Road, that some Virginia Continentals who don't engage in the battle, they will guard that retreat road and resist the British probe at the end of the battle.
I see.
But that's kind of the geography that we have here.
So how's Cornwallis approaching this battle?
Cornwallis's approach is to launch a frontal assault.
Okay. Straightforward.
Yeah, straightforward. Yeah. When Cornwallis or when a British commander like Clinton has better intelligence, better idea of the terrain, they successfully launch flanking attacks in huge battles like Long Island and Brandywine. It's not that the British, want to lose men unnecessarily in frontal assaults. They just, in the lead up to Guilford Courthouse, they don't know how many Americans are on the battlefield. They don't know where they are on the battlefield. When they're starting the battle, all they see is the North Carolina militia in front of them, and they see the middle of the North Carolina line break and run after shooting one volley. They think maybe this is another Camden. They're pretty confident.
Yeah.
They're going to push forward. The militia serve 3 or 6 month tours of duty. Some militia have never been in a big battle like this. Some militia may have seen the defeat at Camden, but for the most part, your militia tour of duty is a local duty against your Tory neighbors and fighting in that civil war that you mentioned.
Right.
It's pretty atypical for a Southern militiaman to fight in this big kind of battle against the professional British regulars.
Yeah, I mean, this is probably the only set piece battle of the American Revolution in North Carolina, and it's not really set pieces. Well, it's set piece on.
It's set piece in 3 stages.
In 3 stages, yeah.
For the British, it's a 2.5 hour battle. Right. Yeah. They fight all 2.5 hours. And some Americans, like the ones on the north and south flanks, those more experienced militiamen, the Continentals with them, they fight throughout the battle. But for the middle of the North Carolina line, they shoot once when the British are within musket range, and then they run home. And they effectively desert. So they are then enlisted into the North Carolina line and fight in the regular army and fight with very great bravery and competence in later battles in South Carolina.
And that's one thing you have to read into some of the weird statistics of this battle, and we'll get through it. But
right.
I think the the accounting of missing and wounded and all that were taken the day after the battle, right? So March 16th. And so you have a large number of missing, but it turns out most of them are just North Carolina militia who just went home.
Exactly.
Okay, battle's over.
Right.
We're out.
Yeah.
See ya.
Right.
But they weren't dead or missing or captured. They just left.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. I mentioned Greene's army had doubled in advance of this, and that the British don't know how many Americans are on the battlefield.
Mm-hmm.
You have 1,900 British soldiers fighting in the battle. They have a couple hundred who aren't in the battle, who are, guarding the baggage. They're in reserve.
Right.
Then on the American side, you have 4,400 American troops. Cornwallis goes into the battle thinking that there are as many as 7,000 American soldiers on the battlefield.
Which would have been really substantial.
Really substantial, yeah. He still had the confidence to take the fight to the Americans, and he really has no other choice. He's sick of chasing them. He can't keep doing that. He wants to just fight a stand-up battle and hope that another Camden happens.
Yeah.
And the Americans hope another Cowpens happens.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And speaking of that, so we've got Greene, who's set up in 3 layers, similar to what Morgan did at Cowpens. The first layer has met, and then the British sort of just keep going.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. So Greene's overall goal of the defense in depth, causing British casualties, causing British confusion, is incredibly successful, even if some of them only fired once. You have some British units marching in an entirely wrong direction. There develops a fight within a fight. That's how historians describe it today. That southern flank is where you're going to have Light Horse Harry Lee's Legion going off with William Campbell as riflemen. One British Guards battalion is going to follow them, and also the Hessian regiment that's fighting in the battle is going to go off in that direction. And they'll actually kind of the Hessians blunder into the southern end of the second line of Virginia militia. And some of those Virginia militia will see blue-coated soldiers marching, and with their ignorance of, Hessian uniform colors, they will assume those are friendlies, those are Continentals. Sure. They don't know that the Continentals are all supposed to be at the courthouse. So that if a battle can have a funny moment, there is, a sadly comic moment when the Virginia militia greet them as friendlies and shout, "Liberty, liberty, liberty." Oh. The Hessians aren't shouting "hey" in return. They march towards them and fire at them, and a seesaw battle develops between the Virginia militia and the Hessians. But there's a case of mistaken identity there.
Sure. Wow. So I had always had it in my head, for whatever reason, that Hessians had white or green type uniforms, but these wore blue.
There are Hessian Jaegers, they're riflemen who are wearing green coats, and they're in the battle as well. They're just more in the center.
Right.
And then you have Light Horse Harry Lee's Legion. They actually wear green coats as well. So there's a lot of confusion.
This gets really confusing.
Different units have some different colored uniforms, but largely red coats are red coats. Continentals wear blue coats with different facings, different color facings to denote where in the country they're from. So the Virginians and the Marylanders, all of the Continentals really at the battlefield are red facings. The Delaware guys have yellow trim on their hats, but also red facing coats.
Interesting. I've learned something. All right. Well, I've learned a lot of things, but I definitely didn't know that. So the British are amassing losses as they're going through these layers.
So that first volley of the North Carolina militia, though the British don't suffer nearly as much as 50% casualties, a couple accounts from British and Hessian soldiers at the first line states that it felt like half of them fell at that volley. Wow. It was such an amassed fire and within such deadly range that they do take serious casualties there.
Yeah.
And then sort of the middle opens. So what you have happen as the battle progresses, because the British punch through the middle so quickly, some of those center units, those British regiments, arrive at the second line very quickly, and the Virginia militia have an easy time driving off that first stage of the British attack because the other British regiments are having a slower time. Some of them are engaged in hand-to-hand combat with North Carolina militiamen. Yeah. 2 of them are marching off in the wrong direction, following a road. Light Horse Harry Lee's cavalry can't go through the woods towards the second line. They're just following a road, and that's all they can do. But this is neither commanding general has effective control of what's happening on the ground. They have these large tactical plans, and they hope their subordinate officers and their men can execute it. But there's a lot of initiative at a unit level or even at an individual level during the Revolutionary War. Like you said, battles aren't usually fought in an open field with two robotic armies just dueling it out until one wins with a bayonet charge.
Right.
The 18th century warfare is more complicated than that. Men have more initiative than that. And sometimes the terrain just makes that an impossibility.
Right. It also happens faster, I think, than people realize. I know the Battle of Kings Mountain happened, the estimates are between 45 to 60 minutes. That's very fast.
Yes.
This battle's, I think you said
2.5 hours. So for a stand-up fight, it's much longer than most Revolutionary War battles.
Yeah.
The only really long battles are sieges, like the Siege of Yorktown, Siege of Charleston.
Yeah.
These are multi-day, sometimes multi-week affairs.
Yeah. And I think our definition of battle changes over time. If you follow American military history, I mean, we talked about how fast Kings Mountain was, how fast the Battle of Bunker Hill or Breed's Hill, however you want to call it,
Sure.
happens very quickly. Then you get to the Mexican-American War or the Civil War. Gettysburg's 3 days.
3 days, yeah.
The Battle of Shiloh is one whole day, and then we get even further into history. We talk about World War II, and there's the Battle of the Bulge. Well, the Battle of the Bulge is a month.
Yes.
I mean, a month. It takes a long time. The Battle of Anzio in Italy is, I think, 2 months. I mean, it's funny how the definition has expanded.
Right.
But here at Guilford Courthouse, we get into, I think, some of the fiercest fighting, even if it is sharp and brief, that you see in the American Revolution.
It's one of the largest battles of the war. It's the seventh bloodiest of the whole 8-year war.
Can you talk to us about that? The 1st and 2nd Maryland had a stand-up, knockdown, drag-out fight with the British. Can you talk to us about that moment of the battle? Because I think that's a very important moment
Sure,
in
certainly.
the battle.
That's where Nathanael Greene is throughout the battle. He only hears the battle come to the Continentals at the third line. Cornwallis is in the center of his army, pretty much fighting along New Garden Road. So he sees what's happening in the center at the first line, the second line. He has multiple horses shot out from under him. There's an Irish sergeant named Roger Lamb who writes an account of the war.
Yeah.
He says that he saves Cornwallis's life because he's getting out ahead of the line leading to the second line, and Lamb stops Cornwallis, sends him to the back.
Wow.
But you can imagine the sense of anxiety or the sense of tension waiting for the fight to get to you. For the Virginia militia at the second line, some of the cannonballs fired by the British in the artillery duel that precedes their assault get all the way to the second line, because that's how close together the first and second line were. They were seeing errant cannonballs come through. They were seeing the North Carolina militia go through their lines.
It's got to be a little
after
unnerving.
the fight. It's got to be unnerving.
Yeah.
And then for the Continentals, they're just hearing it for a long time. And then finally, the fight gets to them, and again, they have early success because the British arrive piecemeal. They punch through the Northern Brigade of Virginia Militia more quickly than the Southern Brigade of Virginia Militia. The Marylanders, I'll talk about something that really doesn't get much attention. So you mentioned that there are 2 Maryland regiments. You have one veteran regiment and one newly raised regiment.
Sure.
What's natural for officers to want during wartime? Promotions.
Yeah.
And you have a newly raised regiment. That means new positions to, be officers of that regiment.
Sure.
And that's what's happening just before the battle. So officers of the 1st Maryland Militia who have very good familiarity with those men are taking the jobs of 2nd Maryland officers because they've got longer wartime service. They deserve those promotions. But now they're commanding, just before a battle, men that they don't have any relationships with, men they haven't really trained with. And that may show in the performance of the 2nd Maryland at the Battle of Guilford Courthouse. The Continentals are, for the most part, facing, due west, waiting for the British to come down that ridge line, cross through the open fields, and then attack them. But they also have to have one regiment, and that's going to be the 2nd Maryland Regiment, are going to face obliquely, not in a straight line. And they're going to be oriented facing a little bit to the south, looking at the road.
Okay.
And when the battle starts heating up at the 3rd line, they can't assist because they're facing the road. Right. So they need to maneuver under fire to then engage the British. And that's when they break. They aren't able to execute that.
Yeah.
It's their first battle.
It takes a lot of discipline.
Takes discipline to move and fight at the same time. So that leaves the 1st Maryland having to, kind of save the rest of the 3rd line from getting rolled up and their flank just collapsing. Mm-hmm. So the 1st Maryland then turned down towards the road, and the British advancing on the Marylanders. We have accounts that it's like musket tip to musket tip, and the fighting is that close between the British and the 1st Maryland. And the 1st Maryland are basically saving the American army at that moment. And then William Washington, talking about individual initiative, leadership, he sees a moment for his dragoons to attack down that hillside and hit the British and assist the Marylanders.
Right.
And that's a big moment in the battle. And then you have the British response to that cavalry attack and what looks like a potential British defeat on the field. And this is where you get some accounts that historians have relied on some primary sources written way after the war instead of contemporaneous wartime accounts of what happened on the ground on that day. So Light Horse Harry Lee, he's not present at that stage of the battle. He's off on the southern end in that separate fight. He doesn't see the British response to the cavalry attack, which is Cornwallis coming up with the artillery and firing grape shot into the American cavalry, dispersing them.
Right, and we've covered grape shot previously, especially when we talked about the Battle of Alamance, but just as a reminder to everybody, that's where you turn a cannon into a big shotgun.
Basically, yeah. And you
basically
size iron balls.
Yeah, you load it with ball bearings and you fire them like a shotgun.
Exactly.
And it's devastating.
So it's, a couple cannons firing grape shot would be like, fist-size iron balls, the width of a house coming down, range hundreds of yards, clearing everything in its path, causing devastation. And American historians relied on Lee's memoir written many years after the war. Again, he didn't see that stage of the battle, but he makes the claim that Cornwallis is so callous and so bloodthirsty that to save his army, he's willing to take a lot of casualties because he says it was just a scrum and he shoots and they kill as many British as Americans. That's not true. That's not the case.
Interesting.
It really hits the American cavalry hard. Not significant British casualties, and it was important that that happened. Otherwise, you might have had a resounding American defeat instead of a technical British battlefield victory, but overall, like tactically, strategically for the Americans, everything goes great, except we have to leave the battlefield at the end.
What you just talked about, that moment with Cornwallis, the allegation that he ordered his men to fire into the scrum, hitting his men and American patriots alike. That's actually a controversial from a historical standpoint. A lot of people claim that that's true. Several people have claimed that it's not true. To your point,
right?
But
folks who say it's true really rely on Lee's account, and
but there are other accounts that too many other contemporaneous accounts that lend otherwise. We've not spent enough time on this podcast, and I don't think we're going to have time to talk about Cornwallis, Lord Charles Cornwallis, and the complicated character that he was. Brilliant man, had served earlier in the war in Massachusetts and New York, went back to London essentially to be widowed.
The death of his wife really broke his heart.
And then he
took that hard.
I don't know that he was necessarily super engaged in politics, but he definitely tended Whig in his politics, in that he wasn't really a fan of the British opposing the American Revolution. He didn't like the military conflict, and yet we find him as, when we think of British general American Revolution, unless you're a very studied student of it, the first person you think of is Cornwallis in Yorktown.
Yes, exactly.
But that's probably not how he thought of himself as the leading general of the this was not where he really wanted to be.
Right.
Overall.
Cornwallis is a theater commander, so given the the long communication delay between him and the commander-in-chief, Henry Clinton, in New York, he has a lot of decision-making and is able to take a lot of initiative. And you see that in the biggest sense in his decision-making after Guilford Courthouse on what to do and how angry Henry Clinton is as a result.
So I'm curious about this part. So we've come basically to the end of the battle. Sharp fight, very bloody.
Yes.
Especially compared to other battles in the American Revolution. And then if you go and watch the film at the National Battlefield, which everybody should visit this battlefield. The film claims, and then Nathanael Greene left. He just up and left the battlefield. When it seems like he's given the British a pretty good whipping. Talk to us about what Greene does here.
Right. So the British take the battlefield at an extremely high cost. They suffer 28% casualties. That's 500 out of 1,900 men.
That's an astronomical number.
Yeah, killed and wounded.
Yeah.
Americans, on the other hand, only take 6% casualties, killed, wounded. It only inflates to a number that seems bad when, like you say, you account for missing, which is really mostly just North Carolina militiamen heading home. The British suffered 93 killed, 413 wounded, 26 missing, and their officer corps, like almost no officer under Cornwallis escapes unwounded, unscathed, and some important officers do lose their lives, either killed outright or mortally wounded.
And that's a whole other loss of leadership beyond just the human toll.
Yeah.
Right.
Brigadier General Charles O'Hara, who famously who famously offered the British surrender at Yorktown because Cornwallis feigned illness and just was too ashamed to go there. O'Hara stated after the battle at Guilford Courthouse, "I never did, and I hope never shall again, experience two such days and nights as these immediately after the battle, when we remained on the very ground on which it had been fought, covered with dead, with dying, and with hundreds of wounded, rebels as well as our own. A violent and constant rain that lasted above 40 hours made it equally impracticable to administer to the wounded, to care for them." Yeah. So you get a sense that the British are there responsible for taking care of both sides wounded, but the Americans do assist. They're given permission for their surgeons to enter British lines. You have basically within an 8-mile radius, every structure, every home is being turned into a field hospital.
Yeah.
The Quakers at New Garden particularly lend a lot of help to the wounded of both sides.
Think through that, listeners. If you're in North Carolina, maybe you're a militiaman from Salisbury. You've been there and you took a bullet to the hip or the leg or the stomach, God forbid. And you're just laying there hoping somebody will find you. And then you get 2 days of rain. But it's not just rain. We all live in North Carolina. It's those early March rains that are cold.
Yes, it's a cold rain.
Yeah. There's nothing about this that screams care and comfort.
No.
It's a miserable 2 days.
It's miserable, yes. In Greene's army after the battlefield, they're still in the vicinity. So they're at Troublesome Creek. That's where the Americans have to march, upwards of 10 miles to where they've left their baggage and where the camp followers are, where their reserves are guarding their supplies. And they stay in the area for those 2 days waiting to see what Cornwallis does.
So 28% casualties. Cornwallis has taken quite a bloody nose. This is after his cavalry commander also took a bloody nose at Cowpens. Things in the invasion of North Carolina have not gone according to plan.
No. And even despite his victory, he shares in his papers that after issuing a victory proclamation and hoping that loyalists come out to support him, folks do enter the camp and shake him by the hand and say, "Great job," but they don't join the army. They don't stay with the British army. They go home.
Good job.
They're like, "Great job." I don't trust how well it'll keep going, and I'm not going to risk my life to hang out with you.
So he technically won. He won a tactical victory. It's a Pyrrhic victory, I think we could say. And then Greene has left the battlefield. Maybe a controversial decision, maybe not, but he bled the British, which essentially was his point.
Yes.
Then what does Cornwallis do? I think it's it's a strange sort of tale that gets us to the end of the war here.
Yeah, so with his army so weakened, Cornwallis made the decision to march his army to Wilmington, North Carolina, where they can rest, refit, where they can drop off the roughly 90 American prisoners of war. And he sends his wounded to England or down to Charleston, South Carolina. He's then contemplating, what do I do next? His commander-in-chief in New York, Henry Clinton, would hope that he has some mind to continue to, protect what they've conquered at such great cost in South Carolina in order to win this war, this rebellion. From the British perspective, you have to win the hearts and minds of the Americans. You can't do that if you're just marching pell-mell across the countryside, chasing the American army. That will not allow loyalists to feel safe and comfortable showing their support. So Greene takes advantage of Cornwallis' decision to head to Wilmington by going down to South Carolina and start laying siege to all of those interior posts that the British had. Again, that's
like
not
96,
96 Camden, sites like that. This is not going to please Clinton. Cornwallis, his idea is, let's just take the fight to where I see a lot of men and supplies coming from. It's Virginia. Cornwallis stated he was firmly persuaded that until Virginia was reduced, we, the British, could not hold the more southern provinces, and that after Virginia's reduction, they would fall without much resistance and be retained without much difficulty. So that was his idea. He's seeing thousands of Virginians coming down to reinforce the Southern Army. He's seeing all the food coming down to the south from Virginia.
Right.
Let's just get at the source of the problem. And there's already a British army operating in the Tidewater, so he's going to join that army, make it stronger, take overall command, and have early success. The state legislature of Richmond flees. Tarleton himself and his command threatens Governor Thomas Jefferson in Monticello. Jefferson
literally runs out his back door down the hill.
Flees, and barely escapes British capture.
I mean, I think that's one of probably the undertold stories of the American Revolution that he literally sees them coming up the road to his house, and he literally runs out the back. Actually takes a lot of political flack for it because people called him a coward.
Yes, he does.
What was he going to do? Sit there and get captured?
Exactly. It wouldn't be a good look.
Or helpful.
Yeah.
But I was brave and got captured. Okay, well,
no,
no one's help.
You want your political leadership to be intact.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so essentially, not necessarily directly because of Guilford Courthouse, but it definitely altered the course of what Cornwallis wanted to do.
Yes.
Cornwallis has to go to the coast after he takes heavy casualties at Guilford Courthouse, and then moves up in Virginia, and then he goes to that one peninsula that has confounded military leaders over generations, and does so in the Civil War, and the American Civil War as well. He goes onto that peninsula where Yorktown and Williamsburg are, Fortress Monroe.
Yes.
All of these places that there's a lot of history in this one small little bit of space.
Definitely.
And he gets bottled up.
Yes.
He's Washington's army puts up a nice ruse to let the British general up there believe that he's still there, but he essentially takes the bulk of his army and comes and joins Greene south at Yorktown, and
not Greene.
Not Greene. I'm sorry.
Lafayette and Anthony Wayne are the Continental Army commanders in Virginia fighting.
I lost it, but yes.
Yeah, fighting.
That's right.
Cornwallis in the early stages until the Franco-American Army under Washington and Rochambeau marched down from New York.
And they bottle him up on what is this very narrow peninsula, and then one of the more interesting, if not the most interesting, naval fight of the war happens between the British and the French.
Yes.
Was at the Battle of the Capes.
Yeah, the Chesapeake Capes. Yeah.
I believe it's what it's called. It's not necessarily a French victory so much as it's a French scaring the British off, and they give Cornwallis really no choice. He's got no way to be resupplied or reinforced. Right. He can't fight out of the peninsula, and so he ends up surrendering to or his army.
Yes.
More specifically, ends up surrendering to George Washington on October 19th, 1781. Doesn't quite fully end. There are a couple of smaller battles that happen after that, but that is essentially the end of the war.
Effectively ends the war. And for the purposes of, school children.
Yeah.
Yeah. The war's
Right.
done. For graduate students in history, it's more complicated.
Yeah.
Because it is a global war at that point, and
Sure.
you have these other belligerent nations, France, Spain, the Netherlands, who are still fighting the British Empire across the world. But for the Americans, it's really just keeping an eye on those British occupied cities of, Charleston, New York, and resisting their attempts to come into the countryside, steal our food, forage. So there are some minor battles. And in one of those minor battles in 1782, we lose one of Washington's former aides de camp, John Laurens, the son of a former president of the Continental Congress, a friend to Hamilton, Lafayette.
Yeah. One of those small battles that actually happens after Yorktown is the Battle of Beaufort, North Carolina. And there's an interesting history there. I know we've written about it at the North Carolina History Project. But that's a very fascinating history. If people go to Greensboro now to visit the battlefield, and
Sure.
like I said, it's a national battlefield. It's part of the national park system.
Yes.
What are they going to find there?
They'll find the staff offering guided ranger programs on Saturdays. But any day you visit, you'll see exhibits inside and outside. We've got a visitor center exhibit that's got dozens of significant Revolutionary War artifacts, including a drum carried during the battle.
My kids really enjoyed putting on the not the dragoons hats, the grenadiers hats.
Right.
Very much.
Yes, yeah. We've got some reproduction items that kids can get their hands on, can try on. We've got a 2-mile tour road, 7 stops outside of the visitor center to experience the story of the battlefield, to see signs and monuments that were put up to honor the battle. We've got self-guided audio tours available through the National Park Service app for folks to do a deeper dive beyond just the story from the park film or from the museum exhibits inside the visitor center. So you can, drive the whole tour road or walk the whole battlefield and get a ranger on your phone letting you know what happened.
Yeah. No, it's a really great site. I encourage people to go visit. I'm going to give you the last word. If you had to sum up why Guilford Courthouse mattered to North Carolina and to the American Revolution, what would you say?
Sure. I would say Guilford Courthouse nationally is significant as the beginning of the end for the British Army and one of those first steps in the chain of events that leads to American independence. But I would say in terms of the story of how the battle progresses and how the Southern Army has to work, it's a perfect example of the Revolutionary War can't be won without both the Continental Army and effective militia. It takes both collaborating very well. It takes citizen soldiers and professional soldiers to win this 8-year war against the British Empire.
Yeah. No, it's a fascinating story. Thank you so much. Again, our guest today is Thomas Sobol. He's a Supervisory Park Ranger at Guilford Courthouse National Military Battlefield. Thank you so much for joining us. If you found this interesting and want to hear the rest of the story as we go through all the way through the ratification of the U.S. Constitution here in North Carolina, please like, subscribe, share with your friends, and let them know that they too should be interested in what happened in North Carolina during the American Revolution. We'll see you next time.